Stop what you're doing. Today, you need to move differently. If you're the person everyone relies on, the one who always steps in, then pay attention, because today, you need to stop helping people. Not because helping is wrong, but because there's something else going on. Today, April 22nd, isn't random. It's a turning point. Right now, with the moon aligning with Jupiter, it makes it more urgent than ever that you stop helping people. The moon pulls up what you do without thinking. Jupiter turns it up. Put them together, and what's been automatic suddenly feels obvious, loud enough that you can't ignore it. And once you feel it that clearly, continuing the same way doesn't sit right anymore. That's why today matters. You don't like hearing this, but the way you've been helping people might not be kindness. It might be interference. Because every time you step in too early, fix something too quickly, or make things easier than they should be, you're not just helping. You're removing something they were supposed to face on their own. And at first, it feels right. It feels like you're doing the good thing, being supportive, being reliable, being the person others can count on. But look a little closer. How many times have you solved something only for the same situation to come back again? How many times have you given advice that wasn't really taken, but still expected to be given again? That's not growth, that's a loop. And today draws a quiet line under that. Not in a dramatic way. Nothing explodes, nothing obvious shifts. But there's this subtle awareness that starts to settle in. The realization that constantly stepping in doesn't always move things forward. Sometimes it keeps everything exactly where it is. This isn't about becoming distant or cold. It's about recognizing that not all help actually helps, and that for a long time now, something beneath the surface hasn't been working the way you thought it was. Helping people feels good, and that's exactly why this is so easy to miss. There's a certain kind of satisfaction that comes from being the one everyone turns to. You feel trusted, important, relied on. You walk into situations already knowing your role, already knowing you'll be the one who smooths things out or fixes what's off. Over time, that feeling becomes familiar, and then it becomes necessary. The most dangerous habits are the ones that feel like purpose. Because the more you show up like that, the more people begin to expect it. And once that expectation is set, it doesn't stay optional anymore. It becomes part of how they see you. You're no longer just helping, you are the help. But here's where it turns. It's not just them depending on you. You start depending on that role too. You stop asking what you actually want to do or what you actually need, because the answer is already assumed. You're the one who shows up, you're the one who gives, you're the one who carries. And slowly, without saying it out loud, your identity gets built around being needed. The moment your value depends on being needed, you stop being free to choose. That's why stopping feels so uncomfortable. It's not just about pulling back from others. It feels like you're stepping away from a version of yourself that people recognize. And that creates a quiet fear that most people never admit. Because when you stop helping like this, you don't just risk losing certain connections. You risk losing the version of you those connections were built around. Not every problem that shows up in your life is there for you to fix. Some of them are there to see if you can leave them alone. That's the part people overlook. Just because you can step in doesn't mean you're supposed to. And when you step in too quickly, you interrupt something that hasn't had the chance to play out yet. You remove consequences, you soften decisions, you take away the exact moment that would have forced someone to think differently. And it feels like you're helping. But look at the pattern. If the same situations keep repeating, if the same people keep coming back with the same issues, then something isn't being resolved. It's being delayed. Every time you become the solution, you quietly remove someone else's reason to grow. That's what turning into a shortcut looks like. People stop going through the process because they know you'll be there to make it easier. And shortcuts always come with a cost, even if no one talks about it. This is where today becomes clear. April 22nd isn't dramatic, but it sharpens your awareness just enough to see the pattern for what it is. Not every moment requires your involvement. Not every situation improves because you step in. Sometimes the real shift happens when you don't, and recognizing that, really recognizing it, is where everything starts to change. There's a feeling you've had more than once, and you usually push it aside before it fully forms. You tell yourself it's fine. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. You tell yourself that helping is just part of who you are. But if you slow down for a second and actually look at it honestly, there's something underneath all of that that doesn't feel right anymore. It shows up in small moments. When someone asks for something and your first reaction isn't willingness, it's hesitation. When you agree to help, but part of you feels heavy about it before you even start. When you walk away from a situation feeling drained, not because it was difficult, but because you didn't actually want to be there in the first place. That's the part people avoid naming. The exhaustion isn't from helping, it's from helping when you don't mean it anymore. And that creates a quiet contradiction inside you. On the outside, everything looks consistent. You're still showing up, still doing what you've always done. But internally, something has shifted. The same actions don't feel the same. It's not that people are ungrateful. It's not that you suddenly became a different person. It's that something in you is starting to recognize a limit that you've been ignoring for a long time. And when that limit is crossed over and over again, it doesn't turn into anger. It turns into a low, constant tension, a kind of resentment that doesn't explode, but doesn't go away either. The moment you have to convince yourself it's fine, it usually isn't. That's why today matters. Not because anything new is happening, but because you're starting to see something you've been feeling for a while without fully admitting it. And once you see it clearly, it becomes harder to pretend it's not there. And now, it's time for today's comment of the day. The universe responds to the vibration you give off. Choose thoughts that align with what you want. This one brings it back to something you can actually control. Not everything around you is in your hands, but what you focus on, what you repeat in your mind, the direction of your thoughts, that part is. And over time, that focus starts shaping how you move, what you notice, what you allow. It's less about forcing outcomes and more about not working against yourself internally, because the way you think consistently eventually shows up externally. Thank you for sharing this. Most people never notice the moment they cross the line. At the beginning, it feels the same. You step in, you support, you make things easier for someone. It feels right. It feels like you're doing what a good person would do. But over time, something changes. Helping is light. It has a clear start and a clear end. You step in, you assist, and then you step out. The responsibility stays where it belongs. Carrying doesn't work like that. Carrying stays with you. It follows you after the conversation ends. You think about it later. You feel responsible for how things turn out. You adjust your own time, your own energy, your own focus around something that was never actually yours to hold. Helping supports someone's path. Carrying replaces it. That's the difference. And the reason it's so easy to miss is because you didn't switch overnight. It happened gradually. One extra step here, one extra responsibility there, until it stopped feeling like something temporary and started feeling constant. You didn't just help, you stayed involved. And once that happens, people adjust to it. They don't always realize it, but they begin to rely on your presence as part of how things function, not just for support, but for completion. The moment you become the one who makes things work, you also become the one who can't step away. That's where the weight comes from. Not from helping itself, but from staying attached to something that never really leaves your hands. And the longer that continues, the more it pulls your attention away from your own direction. Because while you're carrying things for others, something else is being set aside. Usually, it's your own priorities. And once you see that clearly, it becomes obvious that what you've been doing isn't just kindness. It's been responsibility that was never meant to be yours. There's a reason today feels like a shift instead of just another day. The number 22 is tied to structure, alignment, and control over where things are built. It's not emotional, it's precise. It brings attention to what's stable, what's not, and where things need to be adjusted. And when that energy lands on a day like this, it doesn't create chaos, it creates clarity. It shows you exactly where your energy has been going. Where your energy goes consistently is what your life starts to organize around. That's why this isn't about anyone else. It's not about what people expect from you or how they respond. It's about you finally seeing where you've been placing your time, your attention, and your focus, and deciding if that actually makes sense anymore. Because for a long time, your energy hasn't really been directed. It's been pulled. One situation after another, one request after another, until it became normal to give without questioning it. But today interrupts that. It gives you just enough distance to see everything more clearly. The conversations, the patterns, the expectations, they all stand out in a way they didn't before. And once you see it like that, something shifts internally. You stop reacting automatically. You start observing. And in that space, something important returns. Control. Reclaiming your space isn't about taking something from others, it's about finally keeping something for yourself. That's what today represents. Not a withdrawal, not a rejection, but a reset. A moment where you stop scattering your energy in every direction and start deciding where it actually belongs. And once you make that shift, even slightly, everything around you begins to feel different. Not because the world changed, but because your position in it did. This isn't about shutting people out or becoming distant. It's about removing the automatic response that's been running in the background for too long. Right now, most of what you do for others doesn't come from a clear decision. It comes from habit. Someone asks, you respond. Something comes up, you step in. It happens fast, almost before you've had time to think about whether you actually want to be involved. And because it's so quick, it feels natural. But natural doesn't always mean intentional. Anything done without a decision eventually becomes something you didn't choose. That's where the shift happens. Helping should come from clarity, not reflex. It should feel like something you're choosing in the moment, not something you're expected to do because you've always done it. And once you start noticing that difference, you begin to catch yourself in real time. You pause, you think, you decide, and that pause changes everything. Because in that space, you start seeing things you couldn't see before. You start recognizing when your help is actually needed and when it's just expected. You start noticing when stepping in will move something forward and when it will just keep the same pattern going. Real control isn't in always showing up, it's in choosing when it actually matters. You don't lose your kindness by doing this. If anything, it becomes more real, more focused, more effective, because now, when you do step in, it means something. It's not automatic anymore, it's deliberate. There's a pattern that's been shaping outcomes around you, and it's been happening quietly. Every time someone avoids something they should handle themselves and you step in to smooth it over, something gets reinforced. Not in an obvious way, not in a way anyone points out, but in a way that slowly teaches them what they can get away with. And over time, that becomes a cycle. They hesitate, you step in. They fall short, you cover for it. They delay, you compensate. And because things still work out in the end, nothing really changes. Whatever you keep fixing, you silently make acceptable. That's the part most people miss. It doesn't feel like you're enabling anything. It feels like you're helping. It feels like you're doing the right thing in the moment. But repeated enough times, those moments start shaping behavior in a direction that keeps everything stuck. Not because anyone is trying to take advantage of you, but because the situation has adjusted to your presence. And once that adjustment happens, it's hard to break. Because now, your involvement isn't just support, it's part of how things function. People don't always rise when things are easy. They rise when something finally forces them to. That's why stepping back matters more than it seems. Not as a punishment, not as a reaction, but as a correction. Because when you remove yourself from that cycle, something else has to take its place. Responsibility, decision-making, consequence, things that were always there but never fully activated. There's an assumption most people carry without ever questioning it, that being a good person means being available whenever someone needs you. But availability isn't the same as value. When your time, your attention, and your energy are always accessible, they stop feeling like something that matters. Not because people don't appreciate you, but because there's no boundary defining where you begin and where others end. Everything becomes open, expected, and eventually taken as normal. And once something becomes normal, it stops being noticed. Unlimited access doesn't create closeness, it removes meaning. Think about it. The things that hold value in your life are the things that aren't constantly available. They require intention, they require timing, they require presence. But when you're always there, always responding, always stepping in, your presence stops feeling intentional. It just feels automatic. And people adjust to that faster than you realize, not in a negative way, not out of manipulation, but because that's how patterns work. If something is always there, the mind stops treating it as something that needs to be protected or respected. It just becomes part of the background. That's where the shift needs to happen. You don't owe everyone that level of access, not because you're trying to distance yourself, but because what you give only carries weight when it's chosen. When you start deciding where your energy goes instead of letting it be pulled from you, everything changes. Conversations feel more focused, interactions become more real, and the people around you begin to understand that your presence isn't something they can assume, it's something they receive. At first, stepping back can feel like you're losing something. Less involvement, less interaction, less of that familiar rhythm where you're always in the middle of things, always needed, always responding. But that feeling doesn't last, because what replaces it is something far more stable. Space. And not empty space, clear space. The kind of space where you can actually think without being pulled in different directions, where you can see people and situations without immediately stepping into them, where your decisions come from awareness instead of habit. Because now, when you do choose to help, it's different. It's not coming from pressure or expectation, it's coming from a place of decision. You're not stepping in automatically, you're stepping in deliberately, and that makes your presence stronger, not weaker. Real kindness isn't constant, it's conscious. This is where respect grows, not just from others, but from yourself. Because you're no longer overextending just to maintain something, you're participating in what actually makes sense. And slowly, without forcing it, your relationships begin to reflect that shift. They become more balanced, more honest, more real, not perfect but clearer. You don't lose anything that was truly aligned. What falls away are the patterns that depended on you giving more than you should have. And what stays is something that doesn't require you to disappear to keep it alive. That's where things get better. Not louder, not more intense, just more real, more stable, and finally, more yours. And if you're still here, still listening, I genuinely appreciate it. What you do with this doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes the real shift is just noticing, just pausing before you automatically step in, just giving yourself a second to choose differently. That alone changes more than you think. You don't have to stop being who you are. You don't have to close yourself off or become distant. Just start being more honest about where your energy goes and why. From there, everything starts to fall into place naturally. So moving forward, don't feel like you need to rush or force anything. Let things settle. Let things reveal themselves.